If, like me, you're into photography, perhaps landscape photography, and you're a family guy, you've got a husband or a wife and kids, the chances are they don't want to hang around for the perfect moment or the perfect light. They're not going to sit there and wait for you to put your tripod together, and they're definitely not going to join you for a sunrise or a sunset. If that sounds familiar, then you need one of these, an infrared camera. So if you don't know what infrared photography is, I'll put a link at the end of this video, because I've already made 3 tutorials based upon, if you're a complete beginner, that was video 1. Second video was about how to edit infrared photographs, and the third video was what are the best subjects for infrared photography. This video is going to be kind of a renewal of all 3 of those videos. I've actually got a week off work, and I'm going to be taking my family to lots of destinations that are probably going to really suit infrared. The number 1 reason why you would want to photograph in infrared is because in the summertime, or when the light is very, very harsh, if you're a landscape photographer, you're always looking for the golden light, generally because you get side lighting on your scene. It creates a bit more depth and interest. In the middle of summer, the sun is directly above you and you're just getting very flat light. It's just coming straight from up above. For us landscape photographers in the summer, what do we do with the middle of the day? And that is where infrared really comes into its own, because the stronger and the harsher the light, the better for infrared. It's the inverse of what normal photography is. Fundamentally, when you look at infrared photographs, it looks like a snowy scene, because anything that is grass or trees, generally it's got to do with the content of chlorophyll, that glows a bright white. There are different levels of conversions of cameras, and you can buy filters. There are lots of different ways you can achieve infrared photographs, but for the greatest amount of freedom, you want to convert a camera permanently, and that way you can handhold shots. You don't have to keep it on a tripod. So that is the number 1 reason why you would want to get into infrared photography. Not only is it different, and I describe it as a bit like Marmite. Some people love it, some people hate it, but I did a poll recently on my channel, and my third, is it my third? It was my second most popular video on my channel that I've ever made was my infrared tutorials. So I can't ignore that. People like my infrared videos, so I'm going to make more of them. So if you want to stand out from the crowd, infrared photography is one way of doing that. Now, one thing that I am doing differently this year, because I think I had my camera converted about 8 years ago, and I have consistently shot infrared every year, but I was getting into a bit of a rut because I was using the same lenses over and over. This year I've been specifically using a longer lens just to create a different perspective, because most of the infrared images in my portfolio, they're quite wide. They are castles and piers and quite wide scenes, and there is a good reason for that. When you use a wide angle lens, or the one that I use in particular, you get a lot of drama because you include a lot of sky, and therefore there is a lot of infrared in your image. The longer lenses tend to have a bit more of a flat look. You have to edit them a bit harder. However, you get a completely different perspective. Not only that, I am actually using a 100mm macro lens, which means that I can do really close-up infrared details as well, which I've never done before. So that is what I'm doing differently this year. I'm switching up my lenses. So whilst we're here, I'm just shooting this scene at sunset. I've just taken a photograph using my Sony here, and I've taken the same shot with my infrared camera as well. And you'll immediately see, obviously, a difference. The infrared is not picking up visible light. There are different conversions that you can get. My camera is converted to a 720 nanometers, which in summary means that it lets in a little bit of visible light, so you get a smidge of color, and the rest of it is an infrared wave. Fundamentally though, I had to bracket the image with my Sony because it's such a contrasty scene. Until the sun has dropped a little bit more, this scene is too contrasty. So I had to bracket 3 photographs, and then I'll merge them in Photoshop afterwards. But with the infrared camera, 1 shot, it's all in the histogram, plus a bit of leeway at each end of the histogram as well. To prove it, what I'll do is I'll show you an overlay of the histogram in Photoshop of a regular camera and then the infrared camera. Same scene, same brightness. Infrared just has a massive advantage when it comes to contrast. In summary, if you're going out on really, really, really bright sunny days, for infrared, not a problem. All in the histogram. The only time you'll struggle is if you're shooting into the sun. So tomorrow we're going to Leeds Castle. It's going to be the middle of the day, it's the middle of summer, definitely not photogenic in traditional terms. As you can see from this unflattering light, I'm out in the middle of the day. I'm at Leeds Castle. I'm currently walking around a maze trying to find my children, but more on the topic of infrared photography. Leeds Castle and similar places have got all of the ingredients that I'm looking for infrared photography. So you've got a subject, which is a castle, and there are a couple of bridges and a few other things to photograph here. Then you've got lots of space, so you can include lots of sky, and if you've got clear blue sky, that will go very dark blue in infrared. Fluffy clouds is an absolute bonus. And then most importantly, the reason I photograph castles a lot in infrared is because generally they've got a moat going around them. Right, so if I'm not making any sense, let me show you visually. I've got grass here, which in infrared is going to glow white, then the water's going to go dark, then I've got my subject, some white fluffy clouds, and then this is going to go dark. So I'll show you what that looks like in infrared. Wow, it is pretty busy here today. Not the sort of place I would normally film and make a YouTube video, but the thing is, my point about infrared photography is you can come out any time of the day and still create portfolio-worthy images. As you can see, the clouds have rolled in and infrared is not so effective when it's overcast. So although it's still the middle of the day and it's quite bright, this is not going to have the same effect. I'll take a photograph so you can see, but it doesn't work as well. This is another composition that I was really struggling with the first time that I came to Leeds Castle and I was experimenting with infrared filters. So I had no choice again but to do long exposures, and then the second image is an infrared converted camera, handheld, no fussing around. This is another perfect example of all the ingredients I look for in an infrared photograph. The sun isn't even out very much at all, but you've got lots of foreground water. The brightness of the sky is kind of balanced out in the reflection because the reflection is still bouncing back enough infrared. You've got a building here, glowing tree, and then you've got this tree going into the water, again creating a reflection, and then you've got different species of trees and bushes around the edge, and that's creating a different amount of glow on each of the subjects. So this may not look like very much to the human eye, but as soon as you capture this in infrared, the whole thing comes together. Amazing. Now, the sun has gone in, but this scene here was one of the first infrared photographs I ever took. This was before I converted my camera. I believe I was using a Canon 5D Mark II 16 to 35mm L series lens, which is not a good lens for infrared. If I remember correctly, there was quite a large hotspot in the middle, which is kind of a defect you get with certain lenses when you're shooting infrared. So if you are going to do infrared, make sure you do your research on which lenses are good for it first of all. And because it was on a regular camera, not converted, an infrared filter on the front of that requires a long exposure. So you'll see in the sky the clouds are moving because it was probably a 1 or a 2 minute exposure. And this is kind of what got me into infrared photography. But at the time, I had to set my camera and tripod up and do long exposures. That was the only choice. But now I have an infrared converted camera. You probably can't see that now, but I can literally hand hold this, no long exposures, no filters required, and I can just hand hold the images. So much easier. If you've enjoyed this video, then consider watching this one next. This is my part 1 introduction to infrared, everything you need to know. Right, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.